You got it?
There we go.
Okay.
We're good.
What is it over there that you're doing?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm going to call the meeting to order. As a reminder, we do tape the meetings. When you want to make public comments, I request that you state your name and the street you live on so that it gets into the minutes. Thank you all for coming, and especially thank you to the committee members who have served during this past year as volunteers. It wouldn't work without you. And I'm especially pleased to see so many election committee members here.
Congratulations to you guys for coming back. We're so thrilled.
Thank you.
Keep the whole thing right.
Okay. Resident comments. Anybody have any comments? Marty?
I just want to say thank you for paving Taylor Street.
Oh.
I have been tripping on the bad pavement on Taylor Street for years, and it is an absolute joy. I'm sure the other paved streets are nice too, but Taylor's the one where I trip all the time, and it's smooth as can be now. Thank you very much.
And to bicycle over the streets now is a pleasure.
Yes.
You don't have to worry about getting caught in ruts or
You know, I have to
holes
say, it's not really fair because it's going to be years
before we get it. Yeah.
Quincy and Raymond, Chestnut,
Thornapple.
and Thornapple.
We're still waiting.
Okay. Any other comments?
Yes.
Lynn? Oh, sorry. I didn't want to take away your ability to announce your name and address.
Hi, Lynn Welly, 209 Oxford Street. I've spoken about this in the past. It's a matter of having sidewalks available for pedestrians all the time, 100% of the time, and never occupied by a vehicle which is blocking pedestrian use of the sidewalk. I think it's particularly true for the children when they're going to and from school. My specific appeal this time is for Mr. and Mrs. Ferris who live on Quincy Street. I don't know if any of you know them. Any acknowledgement? All right. They are elderly. They proceed in a very ginger, small steps, safe way because they're not agile. She walks with a cane. They have a large white, I think, Pyrenees dog, and they walk with the dog equally slowly.
Both of them do, is that right?
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Usually they leave their house, they walk on the downhills on Quincy Street, the north side, which is the odd-numbered side. And it's not uncommon for them to have to go down a driveway apron and then back up across because somebody's parked across the sidewalk.
Is it the same houses all the time? Or?
Yes.
So is there an address that you could give us?
What if I give you the address, what happens?
Well, what we would do is we would let the people who patrol know, and their tactic has been in the past that they will drive by, and if the car is parked over the sidewalk, they will go into the homeowner or whoever who's living in the house and remind them not to do that, and ask them to not put their car over the sidewalk. And then if that continues to happen, then they could in fact issue them a ticket for obstruction or of some sort. But no neighbors would be noted in it.
Well, it's not so much the owner, the property owner, or the resident that is doing this. It's when the service people come, the vendors, the lawn work people, the tree cutting people, the guy who's repairing the clothes washer or whatever. Okay, and I think there's a very slim chance that the patrol, which is just limited hours,
Right.
Would there be a way to get somebody here at the time that it's actually happening, if it's being observed?
Right.
How would that happen?
Yeah, you're right about that. What about, do you know the people who own the house?
Oh, yes, I had a little tete-a-tete a few days ago.
That doesn't sound like it was like you want to go back for another sort of
No.
heart-to-heart.
Well, there were two neighbors that came out defending the service guy that his vehicle should stay there for only 2 or 4 hours, so that he can do his work safely. And I said, what about the safety of the pedestrians who are trying to use the sidewalk, and because your vehicle is here, forcing them to go out onto the street, which
Right.
is not safe. And besides that, the sidewalk is always supposed to be for pedestrians, 100% time of the time. And they just weren't relenting. And then the service person started to get kind of upset. He used some kind of foul language, not toward me, but just the situation.
Right.
And he did move the truck and parked on the curb, on the street. But it was not a pleasant encounter.
No, you shouldn't have to do that. You think the manager can give a telephone call?
Yeah.
Well, in the past, I think I addressed this issue to you the last time I was here. That was when there was a big thing about sidewalks on Dellfield and Thornapple and all of this, and the safety for people walking, and so I just sort of tied it in. And at that time, there was some talk about put it in the newsletter. I have been diligently reading the newsletter for a notice to this effect that people should not be doing this. I have not found it. I'm kind of disappointed that it hasn't appeared. I think it should be in the newsletter every month, or every time it's published and goes out, it should be there, because it's a continuing thing that happens. If there is a way that when it's actually happening and then someone could be brought in, then there's a chance of correction.
But if the issue is vendors, that's going to be, sort of difficult because, I presume these people don't have vendors every day.
No, but they could be alerted at the time.
Right.
But we have to be the office has to be notified, and a call could be put in at that moment.
But that I could do. That would be easy enough to do.
Right.
And there are some households that have vendors, like one leaves and the other comes.
Right. Well, the other thing is that the property, people who live there could move their car to the curb and let the vendors come into the driveway.
That's exactly what the owner had done that day.
Okay. So there are solutions to this.
But this is a driveway which is long enough, deep enough for the owner's car to have been all the way in, and then the service truck to have been all the way in, not blocking the sidewalk. But in this case, the owner made the statement, well, I even moved my car out to the street so that the truck would be here. Well, then why not move the truck all the way out into the driveway? Right. And the guy said, well, I can't work safely if my truck is out on the street. That just didn't make any sense to me at all. So it was not a pleasant exchange. The truck wound up on the street, and then later on toward the finish, he again had it blocking the sidewalk for some period of time.
Okay. Lauren?
It seems to me, I think this is probably an issue across the entire neighborhood, so I would say that it does not make sense to address it to a specific household, and I also think that, placing something in the newsletter, while it's a good idea, I don't believe that the newsletter is widely enough read to have it actually have the impact that you'd like for it to have, and I might recommend that something, a reminder, an email that goes out to people broadly, that's the only thing that's in the email, just says, as a reminder, we've had some issues. Please remember that your neighbors,
rely on sidewalks, and if you are going to have service people, please ensure that they pull all the way. I mean, let's start there as a general reminder.
Right, and that's
see what happens.
Whether you're
driveway is on a sidewalk side or not, because
Right.
frankly, even if your street doesn't have a sidewalk, in theory, that's still the right of way where in
That's
theory
right.
people.
Calling it the right of way and not the sidewalk matters. That's why
And-
many of us don't have sidewalks.
But they also park on the wrong side of the street, that, which is another issue where the homeowner needs to be involved of not, Raymond, I think, is famous for being blocked with,
To alternative.
is it, of where they, the people block the street. The other thing that's annoying me these days are the lawn services that are blowing all of the grass out onto the street also, instead of picking it up and taking it
Well, the
away.
property owners need to be informed.
Right.
Going back-
Well, don't we have a list?
When you send out the special email, a picture's worth 1,000 words. If you can grab some illustrations, or maybe somewhere or another make something up, just maybe cartoon characters, a car parked across the sidewalk and children with backpacks, or an elderly couple, with a walker or a cane. There was one time actually, this same years ago, the guy has now died, but it was an unusually lovely day in the spring or the late fall, and the guy with a very bad health situation and was taking advantage of this very nice day, and he was on a walker, using a walker, and he had to go around the car out onto the street and back up. Same driveway that I've been talking about.
Right.
And so, I think a picture would be worth 1,000 words. Like I said, school kids, the backpack, elderly people. There's a lot of nannies, and they go out with walks for the children, in strollers. There's people walking dogs. There's all sorts of illustrations.
Okay, Lynn, thank you.
Ron, a quick question. Is it appropriate for the village manager to call up, if alerted that there is a blockage, to call up the home and say, you're blocking, could you please remove that?
Sure, absolutely. It's akin to giving a courtesy notice of a violation of the code before any enforcement action is taken.
Okay. Any other, are you going to talk to us about the weather, Keith?
I'll do it very briefly. Good evening, everyone. We're going to have a beautiful Father's Day, but watch out for storms later in the day. And it's going to be a beautiful day for our picnic on July 2nd, with sunny skies and temperatures around 90 and no storms. So
Wow.
we hope to see you all there.
I can't believe
This is long-term forecast.
Yeah.
Guaranteed.
But you can take it to the bank.
What about July 4th?
It's going to be hot, low 90s,
2 weeks, you
and
can.
a pretty nice day too. That's going to be a great Independence Day, especially down on the mall and for that's the most, that is the most anticipated weather day really, where most people want to know about the weather is on
Right.
July 4th, because there's so many outdoor activities and then the fireworks.
Right.
More on that in the newsletter with Matt.
Any other comments? Thank you. Election committee update, Marty.
Yes. You screwed up there? Watching movies? Marty Langland, this year's chair of the 2017 VMA Elections Committee, and I have to praise this committee. They have been a joy to work with. 4 of our 5 committee members are here, and just all of them terrific, and it was a lot of work. And I have our year-end report for everybody, and I have copies to pass around. Let me pass those back if you would. And the committee has seen these. Does anyone else like to see one? We'll have it for them. We began the year by putting a question about elections in the village survey last fall, and we followed up on that with a very long, detailed Q&A article in the newsletter, answering people's questions and comments. And I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but some of the highlights, I think that this committee made me very proud with their transparency and their fairness, publicizing the election procedures very clearly, following them very carefully. I mean, we really had a lovely, rigorous committee here that really dotted every I and crossed every T, and made me very proud. Open meetings, posted dozens of community notices, and I have to stop right here and thank the staff because they have just been wonderfully supportive. The council obviously support our efforts, but the staff really, they were there when the rubber hit the road for us and really helped in every possible way, getting information out and solving problems. I would also like to note that the committee's email address and the names of all the committee members went out on every single piece of paper and every single email notice so that people knew where to find us and knew who we were. We opened the election season with a very successful new idea, the Community Open House. Lauren Beal, thank you for hosting that. Your house is fantastic. I think we're going to continue that next year. It's a great way to open up the nominations period.
Always at my house.
To be discussed by next year's committee. We liked your house, though, this year. Obviously, we solicited nominations, standardized the guidelines for candidate statements, obtained the conflict of interest disclosure forms from each candidate, designed the ballots, all of that stuff. We handled 71 absentee ballot requests, verified eligibility, assigned them ballot security, random numbers. Really, the new procedures, I think, are working very well. The committee feels that the procedures that the council adopted in 2016 are generally working well. There were some interesting challenges this year. Primary among them, the nominations hoax with the 41 fake candidates. And I have to again salute the committee, particularly Natalie Strasswell, who had very much helped contact 41 residents, all of whom said that they had not given anyone permission to submit their names and did not want to run for election this year. It was quite a task to call 41 people in one day, which we did. And again, commendations to Natalie for the work on that. We may be coming to the council next year with some recommendations on how to minimize the chance of that kind of mass nomination scam coming again. But I do think the committee handled it correctly and very quickly, and it did not disrupt our elections, although it did disrupt the committee a bit, but it did not affect the elections. Again, the final thing, we had the coldest, chilliest, rainiest election day in my memory, and I have to commend the election committee. All of us got soaked. And the fact that the committee stayed cheerful and efficient and friendly and capable through it all, just kudos to the entire team. We'd like to thank you for having us serve. We believe the new written election rules are working well. We thank the council and staff for their support. We are especially pleased that this committee was able to invite such active community involvement, and I understand we're going to have a proposal later tonight about a volunteer engagement committee, which I think is fabulous. It's a nice spin-off from our community activism. And we want to thank everyone who took part in the whole election process, from the survey last fall to the community open house to the actual election itself. We had 244 ballots cast this year, which is the second highest in my knowledge. And that kind of thing is what helps ensure open, honest, responsive local government. So it really matters, that kind of participation. We have some openings on the committee for next year. If you have friends or you might be interested in serving, it's a fun committee. We do have a good time. And we welcome participation because local democracy matters. Thank you for the privilege of serving.
Thank you. And we will be sending out requests for volunteers as the bylaws require that we appoint committees anew, both the elections, the ethics, and the tree supervisor.
Indeed.
So we will be calling for volunteers for those committees.
And we hope lots of people will step up.
Yes, right.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that point? Because
Right.
we have this list of, folks that came out are interested in volunteering in all kinds of ways, and I was in trying to rev up some support for our committee, planning to sort of send an email to everybody that had come out for the various volunteer opportunities, just saying there are openings, this is a great way to get involved. Is that appropriate for me to do alongside your public announcement?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I think as long as you are clear that the council appoints the committee,
Yes.
and so if there are wonderfully 24 names to choose from, that we are only going to select 5.
Yeah.
Just so people understand, volunteering doesn't necessarily mean that they will be appointed.
Right.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay. Naomi?
Just a quick question. So let's say we had a volunteer committee. Could a volunteer committee create, I don't want to call them subcommittees, but work groups or just their own little units of doing things without going through the approval process?
So this is
You mean,
what I proposed in my
that's something to be discussed, I think, the next item.
next item.
Right.
Okay, sorry.
But
Right, there are some, those that are by law required have to go through the council. And we are trying, and this is new also, that every year we appoint new committees, where in the past they just seem to roll over. And we are trying to make this a much more open process and to make sure there's every opportunity for new blood.
I would add to what Richard just said. About 3 years ago, we realized that we were not following the ordinances in how we selected and established committees, and particularly the election committee. If you read the ordinance, it says the election committee will operate under procedures established by the council, which we never had.
Right,
We never had procedures, and the committees were just kind of continued on, even though it said they would come to an end at the end of the fiscal year. So we kind of regularized the whole process at that time to bring them into conformity with the ordinances and charter. It's not really that we're doing things new, we're now doing things correctly.
Well, and hoping that in this process that we bring in new blood, that it's not just the same old, because we did have an elections committee that was very, very good, but that served for probably 25 years.
And it was a struggle to get people to serve on that.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to the committee.
A round of applause for my committee.
Go.
Thank you.
Can I just say, there were 5 of us on the committee, so just saying that Marty did 80% of it. That's right. Just saying.
It's very true.
Thank you. Okay. Proposal for Community Engagement Committee. Lauren.
Great. I'm just going to step up here.
Perfect.
Also.
Perfect.
So hopefully you've had a chance to read over the proposal that I submitted. This really is an idea that came from the open forum that we had early on at my house. There was so much interest and so much excitement, so many people bubbling with ideas, and also sort of expressing that they didn't feel that they had a sort of a clear avenue to actualize some of what they really wanted to see in the community. And these were ideas like, a kids engagement committee, or, a welcome, committee, and all of these different kinds of ideas. And it seemed to me that if we were able to build a community engagement committee that had a direct reporting line to the council, but contained task forces within it that could, create a welcome task force where, when we know that there's a new neighbor on the block, somebody comes and just says, welcome to the neighborhood. Here's when the council meetings are. Here's a directory. And I understand that these are things that have been in place in the past, but I think without a sort of a firm structure, these are the things that tend to taper off when there's turnover, things like that. I also think that a committee like this could be a real support to the staff in putting on great events. We have some wonderful events, and I think there's interest from the neighborhood in helping to make those even greater events, and thinking about, what are some other, we could have a community field day, we could have a, movie viewing, we could have a, a neighborhood, Section 3 has like a neighborhood pub crawl where they go to different people's houses, and, there's so many ways, and I think that what I'm hearing, and I think it's partially because of being on the elections committee, I've sort of become more of a public figure. I guess people are coming and talking to me and just saying, this is a place that I want to live for the next 50 years. I'm raising my kids here. I want this to be the best possible community, and I want to give myself to the community, but I don't know how to make this happen. And, I think that in my mind, a committee like this does create a kind of a streamlined structure where, again, there's accountability to the council. It's sort of a single reporting relationship. Obviously there is a strong possibility that there would be budgetary requests that came with some of these things, but I think, we could easily develop a process where, those budgets were sort of brought to the council in advance for approval. We would be able to vet them through our legal department, make sure if we're having an event that insurance is in place, that all of the kinds of protections that we obviously would want for the community are in place. But that's the proposal. Obviously, I stated this in the proposal as well. We would follow public
Meetings.
Public meeting.
Open Meetings Act.
The Public Meetings Act.
And
Thank
Public
you.
Information Act.
Exactly. And so, what I am imagining is, again, a monthly meeting that would be announced through every channel. We could record the meetings. They could be held here. Bringing people out to really try to actualize some of the ideas that people are bringing to the fore. I think that task forces would probably, have separate meetings, possibly in people's homes, possibly over email, but would all be announced that there is if you're interested in joining this task force, this is where the action is happening and then that all of the kind of different actions would be channeled back to the council through a reporting structure.
Okay, interesting.
And would be building new blood. It's a low barrier for people to really get more involved.
And why do you think people aren't involved? Are we discouraging them?
There's no venue, there's no structure.
I think that's right. I mean, I think that, right now, if you have an idea, okay, what do you do with that? Where do you find the other neighbors? Where do you, we hear that there's a surplus in the neighborhood. We're trying to think of great ways to spend it, but how would you even access it? There isn't a formal structure in place that would allow the neighborhood to really make good on it. I also think that some of it is the timing of meetings. I think I've said this in the past. I think it would be great to have a sandwich board out in front that just as people are driving home from work, oh yeah, there's a council meeting tonight. Things like that. I also think that I know, and this is again down the line, I think the first items we would probably try to tackle are some of the, very clear and easy things that we, like the ones that I've mentioned. But, I could imagine this also being a space for, other kinds of community forums that were a place for the council to be able to gather information without any kind of sense of there being really like a power dynamic in place, or it just might be an opportunity for information gathering for the council as well.
Now, I have one. Ron, I thought I had recalled that all official committees have a council member as member, but I went and looked through the ordinances and the policies and everything else, and there was nothing written on that. Is that your recollection or what?
That's my recollection as well, yeah.
But it's not in writing anywhere. At least I couldn't find it.
No, it's pretty rare for municipal charters to govern committee formation. It's a general power that all.
But yeah, the charter just says the council may establish committees.
Right.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah, I would think we would want council representation, on the committees, just because, for a host of reasons. One would be just so there's some history, but also someone that can answer questions about budget or procedure, that I think that would be helpful.
Sure.
One committee that we did establish in the past 2 or 3 years ago was the tree committee, and that operated under terms of reference established by the council. Actually, the person who became chairman of the tree committee, which was me, wrote it up, submitted it to the council, who liberally amended it, revised it, and they revised the draft. And that was the terms under which we operated. But we had a clear mandate of what we were aiming at. There were objectives, there were measurements, and so on. And then it came to an end. So I think at a minimum we would like to see a council member on the committee, terms of reference.
As a council member and not as a neighbor.
Right,
Like
as
to be
right,
as
representing the
you.
council or
Okay.
being a voice of, or a direct participant.
Okay.
So you don't mean one of you being on the committee?
They do mean that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine. Why not?
Yeah.
I know, I understand, but I think that's an overload. having some-
You think it's what?
Like more work.
Exactly. Well, that's another
The whole
question.
point of this.
Yeah, I know. That's another issue.
Pushing it out.
I mean, I
Yeah.
do think that if we were able to set up very clear parameters, again, for
Yeah.
reporting, for budget requests, for, laying out objectives in advance.
Right. Yeah. Well, I would think that to begin with a specific task, and the first one on your list is the Welcome Committee, which, as you said, we have done off and on in the past, and it seems to have fallen into abeyance. And that's a great way to get people as they come into the community
Exactly.
to welcome. And we even have bags up there
I know,
to hand
they're
out and
sitting there.
things to give out. And
Exactly.
Video.
yeah, the video, the history, all these sorts of
I think it
things.
would be lovely to put a bottle of wine or some baked goods or something
Or
from
even
our
something from
local
the
Yeah.
people here.
businesses, yeah.
Those burger
Yeah.
cookies are really.
So my question is then how to proceed.
I have a question. So, our elections committee didn't have representation by the council members.
We have a liaison to you, Richard.
Well, but no,
But
one of
this
the
is-
council member.
That step back.
But
That's because we're a little different because that's
Yeah.
a statutory.
That's a statutory, was established by charter and then fleshed out.
But I don't know how many meetings you had that there wasn't a council member present.
You were very good about that. All of you were very good about that.
What, yes.
But we had no committee member who was a council member.
Right,
But we're
right.
talking about, like sub
Task forces.
task forces. I mean, as neighbors, there's no reason why I can't invite so-and-so and create our own mini task force. But really what we're asking is then, so say Lauren was the official
liaison.
liaison
Yeah.
of the committee, and she could meet, maybe just that meeting is happening with all the task forces together with a council member
Exactly.
present.
Yes, that's how it would be.
As
No, it
opposed
wouldn't
to,
be. It
as
would
opposed
be.
to one of you at every task
No, no,
force.
no.
Sub sort of committee task force, whatever
No.
you want.
I don't know, I don't understand why you wouldn't want that.
Want a council member
Yeah,
present?
why, what would be
there's no
the,
reason
No
not
reason, it
to.
just seems like extra work.
It is,
Guys,
yeah.
it's just
Well,
And to get
indeed,
somebody
yeah.
So
involved, yeah.
if that ends up making the council say, well, this is going to be a burden on council,
Right,
on
right.
council service.
Right,
That's why,
yeah.
right.
right, but I
Okay.
also, I think it gives us an opportunity to evaluate also how this is going forward so we understand it too. I mean, I think you benefit, frankly, by having a council
Well,
member.
just thinking from the tree committee experience, at every meeting, I reported on what had happened.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean that a non-council member could also be here to report, as Marty does for the election committee.
Right, in fact, we prefer that,
Right.
that it be,
So I would suggest, let me send you the terms of reference that were produced for the tree committee that you can look at to see whether this is an appropriate model or not. I'm not sure that it would be for this. And focus on, say, a single task to begin with, the welcome committee. And then do you think you can round up 5 people now?
I mean, here's what I would say.
Yeah.
I think that a welcome committee is very low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
I think that the glory of this committee is that it is crowdsourcing ideas from the neighborhood of things that people want here, and then bringing people together to work on those things, so that every event we do is put on with the sort of heart and soul of the neighborhood
Right.
in it.
Yeah.
And I think it would be against the spirit of the committee that I'm proposing to dictate that the only task we're doing is a welcome committee.
Right.
I think that what is very important is to have a forum where all of these people who have stated that they want to get involved in the neighborhood have a chance to come here. In my fantasy, we would set the room up as a circle, and we would bring out some of the suggestions that people have already made. We'd cluster them. We'd say, who's interested in what? What do we think is, something that we could do easily without much money that would be just good for everyone. And it might be that there are 2 or 3 of those ideas. And I think, in some ways, the only thing that is being requested is the ability to sort of bring this to the council for official support from the neighborhood should an idea bubble to the surface that we feel like is going to really bring something great to the neighborhood. And that's not to say that every idea that comes up will have legs.
Right.
But at least neighbors will meet each other who share interests.
I'm wondering, if there are a group of people who want to do this, do they need council validation at all?
If they're going to make requests for
budget,
budgets, and
well,
I believe that
then
we should be that this. I mean, I believe that if we are putting on events that are going to, just as
oh yeah, right,
the
yeah,
wine. I mean, that is the only reason.
Okay.
But you'd still be able to bring bring those proposals individually to the council. If you find that you need funding.
What I'm wondering is, if a group of neighbors come together and have an idea and they say, well, this is going to be, this is going to cost us $6,000.
Right.
Is that good with you all? My guess is that if we don't have a structure in place where you understand what's happening, you understand the process, where we have a vetted relationship, that it is, this is probably going to streamline our ability to actually get that done, as opposed to sort of proposals that pop out of the blue.
Right.
And this is a way for you all to stay very abreast of what's happening.
So, what, you want to say something?
I would say from a legal standpoint, if the council were to routinely hear recommendations from an unofficial committee, it may become a de facto official committee, and at that point might as well be an official committee.
Okay.
In the public's eyes, there may be no difference, and we would want the committee to comply with the Open Meetings Act and the Public Information Act.
Okay,
so.
good. Okay.
But of which Lauren has said they will.
Yes.
And that they will have somebody who, this other of where you have to take some test, so that there is somebody who understands the Open Meetings Act.
You do it
I'm certified in the
online.
District of Columbia. I don't know if that
You
matters.
do it online.
I've already passed through as a commissioner. I don't know if that counts, but I've been trained.
Yeah.
Well, that'll make the Maryland test very easy.
We had some comments.
Yeah.
I think this is a fabulous idea, and it is a way of harnessing the energy that's bubbling up, and it's a way of investing in our future leaders.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, we have to pass the baton, and we can't just have this many positions, some of which are not the most interesting. Elections committee is fun, but it's not that much fun. Not as much as putting a centennial on, right? So we need to have ways, and this is a great way. It's an infrastructure that we're building here.
Okay. Marty, you were going to say?
I also want to speak in support of this proposal. One of the nice things about the election committee the last 2 years has been the community connections and involvement. And I really do feel that we need a pipeline, and we also need to reduce, I'm an economist, the barriers to entry. This is the first committee I've served on, and I've lived here 32 years. It needs to be easier for people to step up and become involved in a project. A task force of this committee is a low barrier to entry. And whether they're working on a kids after school program, a softball at the park, or a community garden project, whatever it is, it's going to be small enough that it'll be doable. Mm-hmm. And I think that the barriers to entry right now, you can run for the council or you can serve on a couple committees, but there's really no path.
Right.
No easy path.
Yeah.
The path has fairly large, being on the election committee is a fairly large commitment for work.
Yeah.
And this is less work, more doable, and a better pipeline. And so I really support it. Plus, I think some interesting stuff will come out of it. I'm a big gardening fan. So I want to see what you do with the garden.
Well, here, what it seems like is evolving here is an idea of like a core committee with a lot of support going on for specific things that may not be official committee members.
Yeah, just task forces.
Okay, but that in terms of structure, then it would seem like there would be a committee appointed by the council who are in charge of running it, and then others that you gather up for specific things
Exactly. You
who
open
are
it up. Yeah.
you open it up.
2 kids too, by the way.
I mean, I think that I know that there are people who are interested in a sort of a kids engagement
Yeah.
task force, and I mean, again, I think we had so many ideas that came out, and I think that the worst thing that you can do when you ask someone to generate ideas is never follow up with them.
Yeah, right,
That is how
right.
you kill
Yeah,
engagement.
yeah.
Right.
And we're in this critical moment where I think we have the ability to push this
Okay.
to a real place.
Yeah.
Suppose, let me send you the terms of reference that we had before to see if it's any kind of a model at all. It may not be appropriate for what you have in mind, but we need a sense of structure, like how many members of the committee, is it necessary to have a council member on board?
Can I ask that
Yeah.
back? I mean, I know that there's 5 members of the elections committee. That makes good sense. In
Right,
terms of
5 is a
tasks.
good number.
Well, those sets of tasks also require people to be cognizant of what each other are doing, that
Yeah.
there's some ethical reasons why there are 5 in that case.
Yeah.
You know, there are plenty of committees in the world that don't have 5 appointed
Yeah.
people, and they have a lot of people that are involved. I mean, so I guess I'm wondering, is there a reason why you, especially if you're recruiting workers, I mean, what you're doing is, 5 is nice because it shares a workload. If what you're doing is recruiting people who are gonna pitch in various ways, is it necessary from a legal perspective, committee perspective, to have 5? I mean,
No,
could you
no.
have 2? Could you have co-chairs?
Yeah, no. It is not
Generally, you
legal.
want an odd number because
Of voting.
committees are advisory in nature. They form a recommendation by majority vote, and you don't want an even number because you could have a deadlock. So you want an odd number to vote on what recommendation you're giving to the council.
I guess, and again, just as from a structural perspective, in my mind, this is, and maybe I'm off on this, but my sense is that whoever is in the room would be voting on what direction we would go, and so in fact, you'd have someone who was a channel to the council, and the council makes the final decision on anything, on any kind of budgetary decision. But from a kind of a collective decision-making process, I think it is important that those people who are showing up and who are investing their time get to say, you know what, I think that this idea is something we really want to push, especially if they're the ones carrying it out.
What about this are you planning an organizational meeting, Lauren? I mean, are you going to say, okay, if I've got, I'm trying to put together this committee, and if there are people who would like to talk about ways to do whatever,
What I was planning, and I didn't want to announce anything prior to the council saying one way or another whether they thought this was a good idea, but if this was approved, the next thought would be to send an email to everybody who has already raised their hand in various ways and said, great news, we've gotten approval to form a community engagement committee, would love to welcome everyone to come to the village office on X date. We would then also post that broadly to the neighborhood, so it was open to everyone. Please come with your ideas. We're so excited to dig in together. And then people would come, and we would start with the suggestions that had already been made, try to understand where there seemed to be particular energy or interest, since again, this is going to be carried out by neighborhood volunteers. I agree that the welcome group seems like a very easy start. I also think that establishing some kind of a street captain system would just be a good idea for us in terms of just identifying someone who going forward says, I'm a street captain, I can disseminate information, I can find out from my neighbors if there's a problem and make sure that it comes to council, things like that. And then
what happens if you start back just a little bit and say, we're exploring this idea of this committee, and we need to meet with people who are interested and get sort of a handle on it, where we want it to go, how people are going to be interested, and then let us move together.
So wait a minute, so you're saying do this, actually do it.
She should do the organizational meeting meeting, we approve that.
Get a sense of the interest, the numbers,
Right.
the head counts.
Right, find out what are the priorities. And so,
I almost,
Separately from the, I mean, I'm happy to do that. My sense is that from the information that we elicited from people both at the open house and on election day, that we have a very long list of ideas people have generated. But again, I'm happy, I'll follow whatever.
What happens typically is that you have a lot of expressed interest. When you ask for people to show up, they typically don't. But Alyssa,
that's what I was kind of going to speak to, is that that we just wouldn't want a repeat of sort of what happened at your house. Like we would want to make sure that people who come to the meeting know that they're coming ready to roll their sleeves up, ready to sign up for the paper that at the top says garden committee or welcome, like
That's right.
knowing that they're coming because they actually want to have
Right.
this
Something has been
volunteer. Not just because they
Right.
have ideas, because a lot
That's
of people have
happened
ideas.
already.
Yeah.
And that's happened already. I mean, and I think
Right.
that, we sponsored, the council sponsored an event to bring people out and
Right.
share their ideas.
right.
Their ideas have been shared, and I think that I agree that many, and a lot of people who've expressed interest, these are working parents, these are people who are juggling a lot of things. To have a meeting to establish whether or not we should have a committee, I think is going to
No.
make people feel bogged down in the sort of
No,
bureaucracy.
but have the organizational committee so that you see who comes, you see what the interests are, and then you come back and say, boy, this is where it's headed, and here are specifics that we could use that's going to help us make this work.
because it does involve time and effort and commitment, not just expressions of enthusiasm.
Of
Or
course.
be allowed to use this space to do that.
Sure.
No, I mean, I would, absolutely, it would require,
And there's one other point, is that the idea of a defined committee versus a more amorphous groups that get together. The defined committee are people who have taken responsibility for leading it, for being at all the meetings, for doing the work, and they are names that you could, people you can talk to.
That's right.
So I can see a dual structure here, one of named committee members who then organize subgroups that are broader, more specific. But I think Richard's notion is a good one, is that we need to get a better sense of the actual going beyond the initial enthusiasm. Who's ready to show up?
Yeah, but don't misunderstand our enthusiasm. I think that what you're proposing is wonderful. We have, we tend to get caught up in, what happened the last time.
Yeah.
And so it makes us somewhat cynical almost of, we've had welcome committees, and unless somebody stays on top of it, then pretty soon it just fades from view. And, we have to do it again. Is there a way to get that enthusiasm, but keep it coming so that, Naomi can be the street captain?
It's by having really fun events where people get to know each other, come out and say, this was really fun, I want to be a part of this.
Right.
I mean, that's how you do it. You just do it by doing it.
Right.
And I think that until we make the jump of just doing this,
Right.
we're never going to get to 100 until we get to 30 and 60 and 90.
Right.
So I am happy to ask people to come out. I am happy to be.
Well, you don't think it's a good idea. You have qualms.
I'll, as I said, I'll follow whatever procedure.
Well,
is
we're
necessary.
trying to come up with procedure that we're walking through the dark here.
Right.
We're stumbling.
Right. Well, I think this sounds like a great start. I think that. I think unfortunately the timing in the summer
That's
is
right,
going to bring out fewer people than it might. I hope that the council. I think it matters that we start this though, because I think that this is the kind of thing that you want to have in September and you want to have in October. I mean, across the street, we rented across there. Every month there's a community event. Every single month people are coming out. They have a barbecue to welcome new neighbors. They have a food truck event. There's a party in the park. There's all of these events, and it feels so cohesive on that side of Brookville. All generations.
Section 3, is that?
Section 3.
Yeah.
And there's no reason that we can't have that kind of energy here.
Okay.
And I think it's just about building a rhythm of it
Okay,
and making it the cool thing to do.
We're with you.
All right.
okay. So we need, I think, so what's the next step is
The
to,
next step is for Lauren to put together her meeting, and we're there.
Okay. I am going to respectfully request, because I think one of my hesitations around having a council member is that you do have a lot of historical memory, and there's a way in these early moments that there's something called bud snipping.
Yes.
Where
You can dampen it all.
Yes,
right.
and I
Okay, we won't, no
what I'm
bud
saying is,
snipping.
if a council member is going to be present and we welcome you,
Don't
let
bud
us
snip.
let us just bubble for a second.
Right,
All
yeah.
right. Let us just get some
Okay,
enthusiasm.
good.
And we won't sit there and say, tried that before. Didn't work.
And you can't say, well, that's illegal. We'll come to that. We'll
Right.
figure it out. We won't
Right.
do anything
I'll
illegal.
be there.
All right, good.
Even better.
Okay,
You're on.
Thanks very much for your consideration.
I'm out of energy now.
okay.
I want Lauren for my cheerleader. Action on the minutes of
Approved.
May 11th that were approved by the internet. Motion to approve.
We'll move to approve.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Oppose. Discussion and introduction of the policy on sump pump and roof drain. Roof drain. Woof drains, discharges in the public right-of-way. This is the sort of thing that captures the enthusiasm and attention of everyone. I mean, how do you make this interesting? Okay, but it is, because a lot depends on it. Doug and Ron. Who wants to open?
Have we done this before?
So yeah,
Yes.
This was, we.
currently, village policy prohibits sub-pump discharges into the street. The existing policy is being amended to add roof drain discharges, and as amended, it would say roof drain discharges onto a street will be allowed only when there's no other reasonable alternative. And that is to prohibit puddling and ice on sidewalks and in the street where it can be avoided. The council took a look at this over email after we had a resident seeking to add such a discharge for his roof drains and construct a tube through the sidewalk to allow discharge onto the street. It was allowed in that case because there was no reasonable alternative, but we thought there should be a policy in place, because if every house in the village did that when it was perhaps not necessary for every house, then you might end up with a lot of water on the street. So if this was introduced at the May meeting, it's now ready for public comment and adoption.
Has there been sufficient time from when it was introduced in May?
Yes, it was
Okay.
introduced on...
Anybody have comments on?
Actually, let me check that, Richard.
Okay.
While you're looking, there,
Oh, no, we're 3
May
days short,
18th.
yeah.
Yeah. Jesus.
We have to hold things over for 30 days, so I apologize. It's not ready for adoption tonight.
But it's ready for hearing. If anybody has any comments on sump pump and roof drain discharges into the public right-of-way, let them speak now.
this is an area for the Green Committee to educate people about rain gardens and various other means of holding water on a property. And there was a discussion during the election campaign about
Water. Yeah.
Water and green, greening the community.
Is that something you work with, Lauren?
I do more in the food education, food policy.
Okay.
But this
I know the rainwater people. I know all the.
Yeah, because this is a big issue. They're all variety of alternative methods instead of just draining off the water, keeping it on the property.
Okay, so no other questions. We will.
Have to come back to that.
We don't move anything on it. It'll be back in July for adoption.
Yeah.
Discussion on permitted work hours for construction. Lohmeyer and Trollinger.
Yeah, there's not much there. I think it maybe didn't come up at the May annual meeting, but I think at the April meeting, a resident had proposed the idea that the council consider changing the permitted work hours in the village. Right now we basically follow Montgomery County, which is essentially 7 to 9 on weekdays and 9 to 7 on weekends.
Okay, do we have
Including Friday.
Right.
Do we have a
Fridays.
proposal in here to limit the
7 to
hours?
7.
Is it a policy issue?
No, that would require a code amendment because currently work hours are addressed in the code.
Okay, is there any sense, does any public comment on those work hours?
I mean, my feeling is that that's tricky because if you're having work done on your house, you want to accommodate the people who are working who have a lot of work they want to get done for you as quickly as possible. But as a neighbor,
Right.
you obviously would prefer they come a little later. So I frankly haven't had a lot of.
I think it's the 9 p.m. one that's the issue.
Yes.
Is that 7 p.m. at night seems to be long enough. Is that still too long?
No, I mean, to me, the bigger question would be enforcement.
Enforcement of the
because
current.
right now, because we mirror Montgomery County's law, it's easy to have them act as a proxy to enforce our laws. If we have separate permitted work hours,
We have to do it ourselves.
it would just create that how to enforce it and figure out.
But I think the issue, there is an issue of enforcement, of making sure that they turn off their trucks when they arrive and don't start the work, and don't have their radios blaring and that sort of thing.
And that they back up the length of a street at
Yeah, with the
6 in the
beepers
morning.
going, yeah.
I honestly think that the nighttime hours are the more problematic ones. I think that if, we have there's backhoes and there's, if you have to have lights on to be working outside, it seems pretty, it's too late to be working. And I think that, I guess I'm wondering, as someone who built here, we were given the hours, we were told the hours, we were very clear with our laborers what the hours were. When there was a complaint, we heard from the village manager and we immediately told, so the enforcement kind of happens through, it's not, you're not going to give someone a ticket, but you are letting people know.
Right.
You do have some control over their permit.
Yeah, I think there's an enforcement of the existing, and to kind of be on top of it when people complain.
Yeah,
but it is complaint driven. We don't know that's
Exactly.
going on
But
unless
my
somebody
point being,
calls.
if you were to make that an 8 o'clock p.m. end time, and that was publicized, then you would get complaints when people were working at 8:30.
Yeah.
You would notify the homeowner that, just a reminder, it's an 8 o'clock stop time. They would tell their people, and that's how it would go.
It's more effective when it is the homeowner doing the building than it is with spec housing, which is generally where the problems are. That it is the spec housing people who are are trying to get it done as fast as they can.
Right.
And 9 o'clock, if they still have stuff to do, going to 9:30 isn't a big deal. And, so that's an enforcement part.
And they have no accountability.
No
to the neighbors.
accountability, yeah.
Do they have any, are there moments when they come back for additional permitting? I mean, I have a recollection.
Oh, you
I had
could
to
do
get
a stop
final
work order.
stamps. But I mean, you have to get there's final stamps from,
No, you can stop work if they violate the rules.
Right, we could do a stop. That would probably be the most effective.
That gets people's attention.
Yeah.
I mean, if there are more than 5 reported violations or something like, so it's not like you've got to do that work every time, but.
But I think that's a good point, that if people are saying, look at this house, and that Thornapple house has been causing, I think, a fair amount of trouble off and on. It may not so much now. Is it better again?
I haven't, Lauren might be able to speak to it more because she lives right there.
I have not seen any work happening there in quite some time.
Oh, really?
But I also know that there's a huge pile of dirt that is,
Killing a
leading
tree.
also coming onto my property I have that much soil on my property from there.
Can't they go to the county for that?
Well, we've called the builder directly several times about the pile. They said they would move it, various things. But that's a separate issue from, I have not seen work happening, recently. I don't know what they could do at this point because they're waiting on all kinds of things, as I understand.
Right.
Well, the county inspector will enforce the runoff problem, so you need to call.
I will call the county inspector.
We'll give you the number.
Even though work is allowed to proceed until 9 p.m., work must also comply with the county noise standards. And the noise standards get more strict at 5 p.m.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, before 5 p.m., I think the decibel levels can be 75, and then after 5 it drops to 65, and then after 8 I think it drops to 55.
Oh.
And what about backing up sounds? I mean, that's really what you end up having, is just the constant beeping sound, which isn't necessarily, I don't know what the decibel level of that is.
I don't know either, and I don't know if there's a prohibition in the county code. I doubt it because it's there as a safety measure.
Right, exactly.
But the county code also, there's a brochure right there, provides that in addition to noise levels, you can always file a private complaint for a noise disturbance, which is anything a reasonable person finds disturbing in the circumstances. So if it's an unreasonable backup, if they're backing up the whole length of a street instead of turning around and going around the block, it might be a noise disturbance.
So what are we asking for? Enforcement?
Well, yeah, I guess so. It sounds to me more like maybe the hours don't need to change, but more just enforcement of the hours
aware
that we do have.
Okay.
Unless I'm mishearing people. I don't.
No, I think that's it right now. So see what we can do.
Is that...
And if the noise control, if it varies with time, then we have a stronger.
And how do we determine the decibel level?
Yeah, that's the problem with the decibel levels.
With a meter.
I have it on my
They
phone.
have
Got one?
You have a decibel level meter?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I've
I
got
put
one
it
on my
on
phone, too.
I put it on in restaurants.
That's pretty cool.
What's that called?
Disability.
Yeah, I forget. Let me look.
Decibel. Very quiet in here tonight.
It wasn't earlier.
If you go into the App Store, there's 100 of them.
All right.
So can we move on, or do you want to keep talking about that?
Richard gets up into the uncomfortable level.
Yes.
Well, but I guess the question is, do you have tools at your disposal to actually have some kind of penalty? Because obviously a slap isn't necessarily, first of all, I guess I wonder, are there clear procedures in place for the village manager when a complaint is issued to you? Like, what are the next steps? Are those clearly laid out? Are they, do you have tools?
Yeah, we can, typically what I've done is to just remind people the first time or 2 times, and then at that point, I'd probably go to the council and say, how should we proceed here? We can fine them, or we can issue a stop work order, or issue a more formal letter to them. Those are kind of the 3 different ways we can go about it. And if stop work order would probably be the most extreme, and the one that if it is a continual problem, that's probably that.
And we've issued them, not for noise, but for other purposes.
Right, and we issue them so long enough for people to understand what they have to what terms they have to meet before they can start work again. And, that sometimes it takes a day, sometimes it takes a week for them to understand the terms. So
I'm looking at the county website. It is 75 decibels until 5 p.m. Unless you have a noise suppression plan approved by the county, and then you can have noise up to 85 decibel. And then after 5 p.m., it must meet 65 decibels, which
it's pretty low.
It's very low, yeah. I think
That means like running a truck.
idling a truck.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's-
Okay.
Okay, can I move on?
Move on.
Policy on waiting 7 days after the county plan approval.
So this was one that Doug and I and Ron, I think, had talked about before. It is in our code that we have to wait 7 days after receiving county approved plans to issue our permit. And in some instances, it seems kind of overly burdensome and just like we're there's no purpose. We don't need to wait 7 days. So
it seemed that the reason, as I read the code, was so to give time for the council to react to things.
If necessary.
And trigger a public hearing if you wanted.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
But there's an easier way to handle that. When Matt gets the permit and application and is issuing notice to the neighbors, that notice can be emailed to the council.
Which it is.
Yeah, and your review time can start then, instead of for 7 days after the county permit is issued.
Yeah.
Especially in, there are some. In a bigger project, it's not. Those aren't necessarily the instances where it seems excessive, but there are some cases where. I'm trying to think of a recent example.
We just tearing down a shed. We have to wait 7 days.
Right, yeah. Tearing down a shed, for example, in your backyard. And it just seems like it's clearly not going to trigger a public hearing. There's not really much to even review, and to just make them have to wait 7 days seems...
I agree.
Okay, and then there's additional language about officials shall file with the committee. This is on page 3 of what?
Yeah, so I prepared a draft ordinance including Matt's suggestions and Doug's suggestions and some that I had on my to-do list one day. Occasionally we like to do these comprehensive ordinances, cleaning up the things we've noticed. So currently the charter provides prospects for employment and candidates for office have to file disclosure as set out in the bylaws. We have no bylaws. So the ethics committee came up with a disclosure form for us to use so we can accomplish the charter requirement. Problem is, it's a one-time report, and we considered whether the code should be amended to make that disclosure statement be filed annually by council members, including sitting council members, not just candidates. The ethics committee chairs seemed to think that was a good idea and was going to check with the rest of the committee and check in with us. In the interim, we just included it in this draft.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like, it seems like if things change over the course of a year, yeah, of course you should.
But why
Reset.
don't we make it on the 30th day of June each year, at the end of the fiscal year, so the people who are starting in the new fiscal year, as the committees are appointed, that they would sign the conflict of interest statements, and the council members would sign them at the same time.
Yeah,
But did you say candidates
that, yeah.
as well? And that's why then, that's why
I think
it
that
would be
makes sense.
April
I chose April
Yeah.
30th because that's
for the candidates.
it's the state deadline, and I thought incumbents would go ahead and file at the same time as candidates.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah,
We should let
that's-
that go.
that's legit.
Okay, so now what happens? Are we introducing
Well,
this?
there's a couple
There's
other
another.
edits.
There's one or two more.
Yeah, 2 more edits.
Okay,
So on the next page,
These are permits. that are-
currently we have no deadline specified in the code for how long a permit is good for, when it expires, what must be done in order to extend or renew a permit. It can be done with conditions attached to the permit, but it's more practical and more customary to have it included in the code as part of the law, so people know
Right.
it's there, they have advance notice and know what to expect. And so this would say, after you get a permit, you have to start work within 6 months, you have to finish work within 12 months. If work stops more than 45 days, the manager can threaten to revoke the permit. Because we want work to continue and finish expeditiously, so the impact on the neighbors is limited. And it also says if an extension is necessary, the manager can grant an extension as long as circumstances haven't changed.
but we were also going to have a charge for extension.
Permit
But
extension fee, that is included.
But that fee is on a policy, not on ordinance.
Correct. Yeah, we have a permit fee schedule that's adopted and amended by resolution.
Okay,
Doesn't need to be in the code.
okay.
But yeah, this code does say we have the authority to impose that fee.
Right.
Council establishes it by resolution.
And I think we ought to, because I think, again, it isn't, we end up spending a lot of money, time of Doug's, Wayne's, yours, Matt's, with all this.
So if the council were to come up with a proposal for that extension fee, we could go ahead and prepare the resolution to amend the schedule at the same time this ordinance is processed.
And currently, a building fee is,
Well, it depends on.
Varies.
On the size, the scale of
I
the.
think one thing that we had talked about is maybe to do 50% of the original fee.
that sounds good.
Town of Somerset uses that.
Yeah,
That's good.
perfect, yeah. So if they've paid $4,000, they have to pay $2,000 to keep,
Right.
to renew,
For each renewal.
right. That
And the
makes
renewal
sense.
is a year? It would be.
Yes,
Whatever the manager deems necessary, yeah, but if they're paying another $2,000, they should probably get another.
Usually what happens is I would contact them and say, when are you going to be done? Have you extended the county permit? And then I would say, what needs to be done? And they would give me a list of stuff. And then I would say, when do you anticipate completing it? And they said, well, we need 2 more months. So I would come to you all and say, I recommend that you extend it for 3 or 4 months or 6 months. So at that point, Matt would issue an extension for, say, 3 months, and in 3 months, if they're not over with, we start all over again with another $2,000 fee.
Oh,
That's the
yeah,
incentive to make them, to get it done.
right.
That's the procedure we use in other communities, so I would recommend that here.
I think that's good.
Yeah, sounds
Okay.
good. Yeah. And then the last edit, I think Matt pointed out that currently the code provides that the tree supervisor has the authority to contract for services of a licensed tree expert, but that authority rests with the council, not with the tree supervisor. So this is just a minor edit, proposing to delete that, and also just add a phrase: all of the duties of the tree supervisor are subject to the approval of the village council.
Right.
Right.
Because,
Just in case we have a runaway tree supervisor.
that's right. And so those are all of the edits.
So what do you want, do you need a motion to introduce?
If the council's ready, we could go ahead and introduce it
Yeah,
tonight.
let's do it.
Yeah, and then it could be When is our July meeting? Is it 30 days away?
30 days.
15th.
It's the 20th, yeah, so
We're 30 days.
No, that'll be 30.
so we could have a
Okay.
hearing then.
Okay,
in July.
let's introduce this now. I move to introduce ordinance number 6-17-1.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Oppose?
With a separate resolution to impose a building permit renewal fee equal to 50% of the initial
fee.
permit.
Okay.
That included in the motion.
So moved.
So seconded.
proposed.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This is to prohibit Pollock over going rogue.
Right. Okay, changes to the Open Meeting Act.
Okay, so the Open Meetings
We
Act.
have one exciting thing after another.
Yeah.
I'm watching.
It's a shame
David.
it's a shame the committee folks left.
Right.
They could
Oh, yeah.
you can hear this. So the Open Meetings Act was amended. The amendments take effect in October. Currently, each governing body of a municipality and every committee has to have at least one designee who receives Open Meetings Act training. A letter has to be sent to the Attorney General identifying all our designees. So the law has been changed. The requirement to send in a list of designees has been deleted. We no longer have to send that list in, but the legislature is studying in the interim whether there should be some other repository to take note of all the trainees. And for the time being, we don't have to submit that list. But the law has been changed in a pretty significant manner. It now will provide, after October, the council or a committee cannot enter closed session unless the designee who has the training is present. Or you go through a checklist that the Attorney General has prepared to make sure a proper notice was sent, we've had a motion, this is the authority, and then that checklist has to be included in the minutes.
So can you be our designated?
No.
No, everyone. I thought anyone. We could all take the.
Well, currently under the law,
Have you taken the course?
currently under the law, the designee could be an officer, an employee, or a member.
Yeah.
As written now, it has to be a member.
So I've taken it.
But
Yeah.
what you're saying, Arthur, is what I was about to recommend.
Yeah.
Everybody should just get the training.
Right.
Then you don't have to ever worry about the checklist nonsense because someone's always going to be there.
Yeah.
And it's half an hour to an hour.
Yeah.
On the internet.
I have a certificate.
Online, yeah.
Yeah.
I thought I did it.
Yeah.
Maybe
I
not.
had a
I think you did.
certificate.
I think you
I
did.
thought so, but
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to my certificate.
But the problem will be making sure that all our committees are aware of this, including the Elections Board, the Ethics Commission.
And our new Off in Space Committee.
Right.
Right.
Right, and that all of those members receive the training as well. And so from a practical standpoint, with this new committee being formed, I think it is important that you have a specific number of members on the committee so that you as the council can appoint them all. And that so under the Open Meetings Act, we know when is that meeting triggering the act, when is there a quorum present.
Right.
I think it would be too problematic to have an amorphous committee with unspecified members.
Yeah.
Once you appoint a committee of 3, 5, or 7, they are free to engage the rest of the citizenry for ideas.
Right.
But
Right.
I think there ought to be an official
Right.
committee.
Who have
A certain number of
responsibility.
people, right, with a charter, as you
Yeah.
noted.
Okay.
So yeah, and then that's it. Public Information Act was also amended. When we deny a request, which I don't think we do very frequently because we don't get many requests, there's a new requirement. If you're denying inspection of a document, you have to state in your denial letter why you couldn't satisfy their request. by giving them a redacted document, just redacting the portion of the document that you feel shouldn't be disclosed. The state wants to encourage redaction rather than outright refusals of inspection. And that's it.
Okay.
Okay, I just want to make a comment so it is in the minutes that at the wine tasting, which I thought went really well and was a big success, that it was disappointing that about half of the people who registered did not show, and that we had spent village money for wine and food to accommodate a larger crowd. And so it was unfortunate that people weren't there because we ended up paying for it anyway.
How many people actually came?
About 85 or 90.
85,
Yeah.
90?
It was really,
It was a good, actually, that's a nice crowd.
yeah. And it was a big success. There were
Yeah.
nice wines. The people who talked about the wines were just excellent. And it was easy to move around. The food that La Ferme provided was absolutely spectacular. Okay, moving on to the financial report.
Financial report, we continue to be in good shape. We are finally dipping into our capital budget. And this year so far have spent $865,000, mainly on streets
And sidewalks.
and sidewalks. We had budgeted, interestingly, $1 million.
But we're not done.
We're not done yet.
Right.
And we got about $75,000 we've got from reimbursed from utilities, and we should be getting some more reimbursements. So we should be coming well around where we had budgeted.
Yeah.
But the budgeting was done on no fact or evidence-based method. It was just pulling money and putting it into that pot.
Well, it's interesting because the street repaving probably is going to end up costing a little bit less than what we expected, but all the concrete work a little bit more
Yeah,
than what
right.
we were expecting.
But the two together will
It'll
come out
all-
about the same.
yeah.
And the street lighting a lot less than we expected.
Yes.
And have you any idea how that's moving?
Yeah, I mean, I can talk about it now or in
Okay.
my manager's report.
Okay, I'm done with the financial
suspense.
report.
We'll keep the suspense. Building administrators report. Doug?
Just a couple things to highlight. We've issued a few permits this year, this month, nothing major. At 6809 Brookville, a permit to replace an existing driveway.
They're doing it. Yeah.
At 3405 Cummings, they're removing the shed at the back of the lot. 3707 Raymond, it appears that they finished that construction and their permit expires at the end of June. So I'm going to contact them, see what's going on, see if they need an extension or if we can finalize it. The county has not finalized their permit yet.
What address was it?
3507 Raymond.
Okay. Isn't Mike? Is that?
It's the neighbor there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they added an addition to the back patio, deck. But it's,
I thought they moved in today. I thought there were people when I drove here to the meeting tonight that they've moved back in.
they might have,
Okay,
still haven't received the county final.
okay.
Expires at the end of June. I don't remember when ours expires. Probably right after that.
Okay.
July 1st.
July 1st, yeah.
At 3404 Shepherd Street, they're adding a second floor porch and a patio in the back. That work is proceeding. And the only other item I've got is still trying to get the state to improve the intersection at Bradley and Brookville, that Palms Water.
Yeah.
I've been going around for almost a year now. I talked to the lady again Monday. She was going to call me right back, hasn't. They were claiming it's our responsibility because the water's on our handicap ramp. And I said, no, the water is in your street that's flooding onto our ramp.
Yeah.
So the lady said, we'll fix it, but everybody in construction says, it's not my problem. So I'm still working on it.
Is that water that is storm water, or is that water that's coming up out of a pipe conduit?
Rainwater.
Okay, because they did find, there was a water pipe problem there for years that
Did they fix that?
they've kind of fixed that. I was wondering if that was recurring.
I think when they fixed it, they warped the intersection so it doesn't drain well.
Oh,
And so on the northeast side of the intersection, the handicap ramp is underwater. And in the wintertime, it was freezing.
right, okay.
The 6702 Melville, which is the permit to enclose the breezeway, is humongous project. I mean, it looks like they're putting a whole second story on the house.
Well, they were remodeling the second story, but it was there.
It was there, I think it's siding
They
and
changed the windows, they
Yeah,
replaced the gutters, but the
the structure was there. And
right.
The only thing they really changed was the breezeway. Everything else has been a remodel from the inside, replacing windows, gutters, things like that.
Yeah, it just seems like a big project where it's to enclose the breezeway. I mean, it just feels big just for that. Okay, it's fine. I understand. Manager's report.
All right. So the first item was that in terms of the office redesign and new furniture, we made our initial purchase, so we're going to get new chairs. The council has tried out a chair, and so we put in an order for that and a couple of smaller items.
Did you try it?
No, I don't think so.
You want to try it?
You better like it.
I'll take your word.
Okay.
there's
too
only
late
one
now.
acceptable answer.
Yeah, too late.
I wanted to also say one more time thank you to the election committee for its planning and the execution of the election and the celebration on the sidewalk. And thank you to the other volunteers, including Keith and David back there, who helped with setting up and taking down everything. And,
In the rain.
in the rain, in the cold. And the other volunteers.
Down that forecast.
Nobody bats 1,000, Keith. It's okay. And the other volunteers who managed some of the volunteer booths. And as Richard alluded to, we had a wine tasting event this past Sunday at La Ferme. There were some sommeliers that were on hand to talk about various selections of reds and whites and champagnes. Residents could try them out, taste them with hors d'oeuvres, just mingle and talk to their neighbors, and La Ferme raffled off a couple of wine bottles to some of the residents. So I just wanted to say thank you to those who showed up.
And those wine bottles we paid for, just so it's clear that La Ferme it wasn't out of La Ferme's pocket.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But the reception has been really positive in people that I've talked to. But because it was sort of a new event, I just wanted to invite any residents, whether they attended the event or not, to offer their feedback so that if we do something like this in the future, what can be done to make it even better. And then looking ahead, the next big event will be our Independence Day celebration, which is going to happen on Sunday, July 2nd. So we're kind of, it's been done in the past, and it kind of fell by the wayside for maybe at least 1 or 2 years.
3.
But we're starting it back up again. So down at Shepherd Park in that cul-de-sac area, we're going to have a couple of different rides that should appeal to kids of really all ages. And we're going to have pizza and ice cream, which everybody loves, and a little parade, hopefully, down Turner Lane where kids can decorate their bikes, and it's an opportunity to get some cute pictures.
Can I decorate my bike?
Uh-huh.
I suppose so.
Yes.
Hopefully no copperheads.
Yes. I just wanted to remind people that the regular office hours are 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, but you can always email the office, and I do check it periodically outside of those times, so sometimes I'm able to get back to you outside of the normal office hours, and it's coming up to summertime, so between myself and Beth, there might be some days where the office isn't open all those hours, but we'll just be sure to email residents and notify them if there are any changes to the regular office hours.
And the council.
And the council will know as well.
Yes.
I just wanted to follow up. I think in April, I was appointed as the village's representative to the Montgomery Municipal Cable Board, which is a nonprofit organization in Kensington that facilitates communication between the municipal governments here and the public by operating a public access channel, and all of the different municipalities pay into to use it. So I just wanted to encourage any residents, if they had any ideas, if they wanted to volunteer, or had some ideas about programming that they wanted to be a part of, or knew somebody that would be interesting to do an interview with, or whatever ideas, they're very open and are openly soliciting people's ideas for public programming. So
including interviews of council members, right?
Yes. So
I was thinking of a swimsuit issue.
Oh,
Like Sports Illustrated, we could do the swimsuit
I'm not sure what to do with that.
of the council members.
Council members.
But in any respect, if anybody has any ideas or wants to,
Moving on.
yes, couple contract issues, or not issues, but things to address in terms of our website.
Yeah, what's happening with that? Are
We
moving forward?
approved the final design, so now they're in the development of the website itself to make it functional. So that'll take a couple of weeks to develop, and then they'll give us sort of a working beta and to work out any kinks, and then we'll be up and running. So
Like in a month, roughly?
I think 6 weeks,
6 weeks.
or so. Yeah. The GIS, so the graphical interface system, information system, we put out an RFP for that for firms or for individuals to update and maintain that system for us. I actually talked to somebody the other day, so I think we should at least be getting a few different options there, just to update our system in terms of spatial information that we keep in our computer that helps us with where the right-of-way begins and ends, public, private property, things like that, determining setbacks and established building lines, things like that. Similarly, we put out an RFP for leaf vacuuming, so those responses are due by the end of the month. So this fall we're going to test out leaf vacuuming in addition to the regular leaf bag collection. So we should have a couple, hopefully, different proposals to sift through there and see how that goes, and we'll add some option years depending on how successful and popular it turns out to be. We're also developing an RFP for our accounting services. Our current accountant did reduce his costs, but it's still costly.
What happened to the idea of the staff doing it?
That is one option, although I'm not so sure that there is the capacity right now to take that on.
That's because Beth has reduced her hours from 30 a week to 20 a week.
Oh, I thought you wanted to increase.
Well, so
That was one of the justifications for increasing.
Okay, I think that we're now into a personnel discussion that we shouldn't be talking about in open meeting. But I think we can, one idea that I thought Matt had was that we get the same accounting software that Dan is using, and we start to see
to run it kind of concurrently with
Right.
him, but to still have at least that safety net and also the
So you can have a
opportunity to
quality
learn it
check on
and
yours.
yeah.
But with Beth reducing her hours, unless we decide that we want to change that.
How much more expensive is the accountant than comparable services? To the extent that you're able to really
Aren't we
weigh
paying
that?
about $3,000 a month?
So yeah, we dropped it down to I think $2,700 a month.
And what seems like a reasonable rate in
Well-
your experience?
Well, so for just bookkeeping services, I think we could probably do something for honestly just a couple $100 a month. With Dan Baden, who's our current accountant, he's a CPA. He has a lot of connections to municipal government throughout the state of Maryland. He works in multiple municipal governments. So he offers some professional services and expertise that you might not get from just a regular bookkeeper. Right. But that's one of the things that, and why it's been, I've been sort of playing around with the RFP to try to figure out exactly what services we do want to be contracting for, to figure out what is the most economical use of the village's funds. Does that sort of answer your
And
question?
there's also, there's a convenience aspect of doing it on the premises versus distance.
Right.
No
There's
late
the
fees.
expertise that
Right.
we're getting, so there's more than one issue there.
Yeah. WSSC, they haven't really, not a lot of movement there. They are still saying they're going to hold a public outreach meeting once they've selected a contractor, which they apparently have not done yet. The work's supposed to start in 2.5 months, so it seems like they would be selecting someone soon, but they tend to move at their own pace and speed, so what seems like would be fitting isn't always how they operate. So streetlights, so you asked me about that. Earlier this week on Tuesday, Paul Wolf and I, our village arborist Paul Wolf and I, met with representatives from Pepco to take a look at areas that they were putting in new streetlights, and to go over any trimming of trees that needs to happen. So we went through the list and approved of everything and worked out everything with them. In my last conversation with them last week, they said, the engineer that we had been working with said that basically everything on his end was completed. So they had sent, the engineering department had sent down everything to construction. That was around election time, and there was some delay in their system. So they apparently will be finished putting together those. The delay had to do with getting materials, so they're going to finish putting together the materials in mid-July. They've said July 24th is what in their system it says when they're supposed to be receiving it, and at that point they'll do final installations and kind of put together whatever last things need to be put together physically with the instruments, and that they said that'll take about 2 or 3 weeks, and then at that point they'll begin installations of new poles and then start to put it in. So hopefully we're still looking at around mid-August, late August, which is I think what we had said.
Labor Day,
Right.
If we're lucky.
World Series.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, in terms of street and sidewalks, I included, I just tucked it into the side, I think, on all of your binders.
This is what you had sent out by email.
Yes. So both of these traffic studies by Joe. So the first one was at Thornapple and Taylor Street, and then the more recent one on Summit Avenue. We took, we set up a counter up at the north end of Summit, basically where you enter Martin's Additions from Rollingwood, and then about halfway between the two speed bumps on Summit. And so the idea on that was to get some sort of estimation on how many cars were turning down Thornapple, because there was some question about the placement of our markers on Thornapple and whether it gave an accurate count of the amount of traffic that actually occurred on that street. And then secondly, how effective the speed bumps were, to get some sort of idea. And I thought that maybe it would make more sense when Joe is available to have a broader discussion about it. But I will say that one thing that I did find interesting is that the average speed down Summit was 4 miles, in between the speed bumps was 4 miles or 5 miles per hour lower than what they are over on Thornapple. And that's going downhill on Summit. Although some people, I suppose, are going uphill. But you had something like 80% of people were speeding on Thornapple. Most of them were going 25 and a 20, so not speeding too much, but speeding nonetheless. Versus on on Summit, it was a much lower percentage of people. So that might suggest that the speed bump might effectively reduce the average speed
on
Thornapple a little bit, and might offer some catharsis for people that feel like people are speeding there. And cut down on the other thing was that I think that there were there on the high end there was only one person I think that we caught going 40 miles per hour or something on Thornapple, and the highest was in the low 30s on Summit. So you would also cut down on the more egregious violators of the traffic law. So that was just something that stuck out to me. I don't know if the statistics actually bear out that, so I'm curious.
Well, I think it's interesting that on Thornapple, the 85% point is about 25 miles an hour, which, when you're standing on a narrow street, feels like people are going by at about 60 or 70, but they're not.
Right.
And it's just 5 miles above the speed limit.
Yeah.
So. And I think people's perception of speed is inaccurate. Is not accurate.
Yeah. I think that's probably true. And actually, I had a conversation with our police officers who had said at one point I think it was a few years ago, but they had brought the village manager out to sort of observe them, because people had been complaining, and they had a radar gun, and over the course of an hour or 2 hours, I can't remember, but there was nobody going above 30 miles per hour. I suppose take that with a grain of salt, because it was a couple of years ago, but yeah, to your point, even on Thornapple Street, the vast majority of people are not speeding at a really excessive level. But on the other side, 85% of at the 85th percentile, people are going over 5 miles per hour above this posted speed limit. Right. So they are still speeding, even if it's not really excessive. So I guess we can have a more detailed discussion when Joe's
back. Right.
Other than that, the other thing, once Joe is available, actually he is scheduled for the last week of June here. We're going to finally put in the stop bars and the other markings on the street. So we found a company that's able to do that for cheaper than what AB Viewers was able to do it. And then over the summer we'll do a sign inventory as well. And other than that, just the regular notices about bulk pickups, and that's pretty much it.
Great, thank you very much. Okay, the oath of office is next. Are you a notary?
I am.
Okay.
Can they take an oath before the term begins?
Yes.
We have to have it by the 1st
By
of July
July
1st.
1st.
Oh,
Right, yeah.
okay. I was wondering if you were going to
You
be
can just
legal.
read this out loud, Richard, please.
Thank you. Do I have to raise my hand?
No.
I, Richard Krajak, do swear, or affirm, as the case may be, that I will support the Constitution of the United States, that I will be faithful and bear true allegiance to the state of Maryland, and support the Constitution and laws thereof, and that I will, to the best of my skill and judgment, diligently and faithfully, without partiality or prejudice, execute the office of council member of the Village of Martin's Additions according to the Constitution and laws of this state.
Thank you very much.
So,
You don't need to sign. I'll sign that and add my notary stamp.
I don't sign it myself?
No.
How interesting. Okay, thank you.
Well, go ahead and sign. Yeah. Good idea.
Where?
It's a good idea. Just right here.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll
And
Adjourn.
We'll have
get Katya come in before the
to come
1st.
in, yeah.
Are you a notary?
I'm not, but that was actually one thing that I was going to bring up is that
Beth
as Beth is, but she's been out the past week. And there's been a couple of instances where people have wanted documents notarized, and I thought that that probably would be prudent for me to also get.
What does it take?
I looked it up.
$25 and
yeah,
5 references.
Where are you going to get the references?
Keith, maybe.
David?
Oh, that reminded me that on Monday, Keith and I and Wayne are meeting with the Mid-Atlantic Adventures, who's the company that's going to provide the rides, to kind of go over the layout and make sure that we have all the right equipment and enough
This is for
electricity
the
and water
4th
and
of
stuff.
July.
That's right. Yes.
July 2nd party.
Yes.
And I think we need to advertise that more.
Okay.
And we need to advertise that we're going to have a parade if people decorate their bicycles, their wagons, themselves, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Something that will be fun for everybody.
Yeah.
Talk it up.
Okay.
Okay.
Signage,
Signage.
emails.
Yeah.
Are we?
And resident comments? David?
Good civics lesson for David.
All in favor? You got it?
There we go.
Okay.
We're good.
You got it?
There we go.
Okay.
We're good.
What is it?